She persisted in science. Written by Chelsea Clinton, illustrated by Alexandra Boyger. Being a woman in science isn't always easy. Sometimes women are told that their ideas aren't smart enough, their research isn't good enough, and their work isn't important enough, simply because they're women. But that is not true. The world needs everyone's scientific discoveries. These women persisted to prove that to every generation. As a girl, Florence Nightingale dreamed of being a nurse. Even though her family didn't agree, she persisted in becoming one. When the British government asked Florence to improve hospital care for soldiers, the staff did not want to listen to a woman. She persisted again, and soon hospitals were applying clean bandages to wounds, bathing patients, and providing healthy meals. Her habit of walking the wards at night carrying a small light led to her nickname, Lady with the Lamp. She dedicated her life to improving medical care for patients and training for nurses. Students all over the world still study her methods to improve public health today. I attribute my success to this. I never gave or took an excuse. Rebecca Lee Crumpler grew up with her aunt in Pennsylvania and saw how often she cared for their sick neighbors. Inspired, Rebecca became a nurse and then enrolled at the New England Female Medical College, the first school in the United States to train women to be doctors. After becoming the United States' first black woman doctor, she cared for low-income women and children, and then, after the Civil War, worked at Freedmen's Bureau to care for people who had been enslaved. In the South, Rebecca faced intense racism and sexism. Some of her fellow physicians refused to work with her. She could have given up, but she persisted in caring for her patients, knowing many white doctors would refuse to treat them. Her legacy lives on in the Rebecca Lee Society for Black Women Doctors. I early conceived a liking for and sought every opportunity to relieve the suffering of others. Niece Aniquita Julita Mexia and her family moved often when she was growing up. The few constants in her life were her love of reading, of exploring, and of being outside, whether she was in Texas, Maryland, or Mexico. After moving to San Francisco as an adult, Niece began exploring the surrounding redwood forests, and she wanted to know more. At the time, it was rare for women to go to college, especially women in their 50s. But at 51, she persisted in studying botany at UC Berkeley. Over her career, she traveled across the Americas and collected more than 145 specimens of plants, which decades later, scientists are still studying. At least 50 of the specimens Niece discovered are named after her. I don't think there is any place in the world where a woman can't venture. When Grace Hopper was born, most mathematicians were men and still are today, but Grace earned a PhD in mathematics and became an assistant professor of math at Vassar College. Then she joined the U.S. Naval Reserve during World War II and began working with a very early computer named Mark I. She was one of the first people ever to program it. When a moth got caught in its circuits, Grace called it a bug, creating a term we still use today for unexpected computer problems. Some male computer scientists didn't believe she could create a program that translated words into numbers, but she persisted and showed she could. Her work led to the invention of programming languages. For all of her contributions, she's sometimes called Amazing Grace. If you could do something once, people will call it an accident. If you could do it twice, they call it a coincidence. But do it a third time, and you've just proven a natural law. As a teenager, Rosalind Franklin knew she wanted to be a scientist, so she studied hard to become a chemist. While Rosalind's early work was on carbon, her later work focused on viruses. She and one of her students discovered that there were two different forms of DNA, our genetic code, and she took a photograph using her X-ray technology to prove it. A male scientist who didn't like Rosalind showed her work to two other scientists, James Watson and Francis Crick, who were also studying DNA. Watson and Crick based their DNA model on Rosalind's work, and when they were awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine, they failed to give her the credit she deserved. Still, she persisted in continuing her research, and her work is still being used today by scientists investigating many viruses, including the virus that causes COVID-19. Science and everyday life cannot and should not be separated. Gladys West knew she had to get a good education to realize her dreams. Her family didn't have much money, so she persisted in working hard, became her high school's valedictorian, got a scholarship to Virginia State College, now Virginia State University, and earned her degree in math. She was hired by the U.S. Navy and focused her work on the study of Pluto's and Neptune's orbits, and found out that Pluto made 2 orbits around the Sun in the same time it took Neptune to make 3. She then worked on the CSAT, the first satellite that could successfully sense oceans. Using that information, Gladys created a more exact model of Earth's surface. Her work is the basis for GPS, the direction system used around the world, so we can all thank Gladys for helping us not get lost. When you're working every day, you're not thinking, what impact is this going to have on the world? You're thinking, I've got to get this right. As a child, Jane Goodall loved animals and dreamed of traveling to Africa to live and study the animals she had only seen in books. When she was 26 years old, Jane moved to Gombe Stream Chimpanzee Reserve, now Gombe National Park in Tanzania, to start her own research camp and study chimpanzees. Because she did not have a PhD, some people doubted that she could make any research contributions. She persisted and discovered many new facts about chimpanzees, including that they make and use tools which no one had known before. Even after her groundbreaking work, some male scientists dismissed her findings because she was a young woman. 6 decades after Jane moved to Gombe, she and the Jane Goodall Institute continued to research chimpanzees, work to protect them, and teach young scientists across the globe. Every one of us makes a difference. How we act each day can begin to change the world. As a girl in Hong Kong, Flossie Wong-Staal went to an American-run school. Thinking it might help her succeed, her parents and teachers encouraged her to change her name from Wang Yiqing to something that sounded more American. Her father suggested Flossie after a recent typhoon, perhaps believing that his daughter could take the world by storm. When she moved to Los Angeles for college, she persisted in her love of science. Flossie was one of the first scientists to study HIV, a disease that attacks the immune system, our body's defense against germs. Her work led to the development of medications to fight HIV. Flossie's research also helped us better understand cancer and other viruses, including COVID-19. Millions of people around the world today are alive because of Flossie. It adds to the joy of discovery to know that your work may make a difference in people's lives. As a toddler, Temple Grandin didn't speak, and she was later diagnosed with autism. Even after she did start to talk, school was challenging for Temple because other kids made fun of her for being different, but she persisted. After spending time on her aunt's ranch, she later realized that the animals she was around felt the same fear and sensitivities to sound and touch that she did. After completing a PhD in animal science, Temple dedicated her life to improving the living conditions of cows and bulls on ranches and farms. Today, the system Temple developed to check how well animals are treated is the standard across the United States. Temple's research, writing, and speaking about autism has helped empower children to know they too can succeed no matter how their brains work. What has given my life meaning is more than doing science. It's helping people solve problems using science, doing something that makes a difference with what I've learned. As a girl growing up in Iraq, Zaha Hadid went with her family to visit ancient Sumerian cities, which inspired her passion for buildings and her studies in mathematics and architecture. Although her professors in England thought she was a brilliant student, and though women were working as architects in Iraq at the time, some people in England thought that women weren't capable of imagining new spaces. She persisted and opened her own firm. Over her career, she built spectacular museums, the Aquatic Center for the 2012 London Olympics, and more. Zaha became the first woman to receive the Pfister Architecture Prize and the Royal Institute of British Architects Royal Gold Medal in her own right. But though she was the first, she will probably not be the last. Close to half of architecture students in the United States today are women. I used to not like being called a woman architect, but I see the incredible amount of need from other women for reassurance that it could be done, so I don't mind that at all. As a girl, Ellen Ochoa didn't know any engineers or scientists. Then she became one, concentrating on optics, the study of how light behaves, and designing computer systems. She never dared to dream of being an astronaut because she didn't know women could go to space. That changed when she saw Sally Ride orbiting Earth in a space shuttle. She persisted in chasing her new dream, joining NASA as a research engineer and then going to space 4 times, spending nearly 1,000 hours in orbit. After Elaine retired from space travel, she became the first Hispanic director of the Johnson Space Center, which trains future astronauts and serves as NASA's mission control to keep them safe. Don't be afraid to reach for the stars. When Mary Copeny was 8 years old, she knew that the water in her hometown Flint, Michigan wasn't safe to drink or bathe in. On a trip to Washington, D.C., she wrote to President Obama asking him to meet. He responded by actually coming to Flint to see the situation firsthand. Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, a pediatrician, helped to uncover that the water which Flint families like Mary were using had high levels of lead, a poison that can harm kids' brains, and that state politician leaders had lied about. Mary and Dr. Mona worked to raise broad awareness about the crisis in Flint and on solutions to protect public health. They persisted, demanding safer water for their community and accountability for the leaders who had lied. Today, Dr. Mona continues to care for Flint's youngest in her clinic and through the organization Flint's Kids. Mary works with Flint's Kids too and is producing her own water filter, all while still in school. You're never too young or too small to change the world. Mary Copeny. The world should be full of people raising their voices, using their power and presence, standing up for what's right. Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha. Autumn Peltier, Greta Thunberg, and Elizabeth Wanjiru-Watihi are 3 young activists who want to explain to the world what science tells us about how and why our Earth is warming and our weather is changing. Even though some people have a hard time believing younger women, these 3 have persisted in fighting for our future. Elizabeth planted her first tree when she was 7. Today she runs the Green Generation Initiative, which has planted more than 30,000 trees. Autumn began her clean water advocacy for First Nations communities years before she became the Chief Water Commissioner for the Anishinaabe Nation at age 14. When Greta started spending weekdays outside the Swedish Parliament calling for stronger action on climate change at the age of 15, she was alone. The next year, millions of people on a school strike for climate demanded more action from their governments. She's been named one of the most powerful people in the world. We showed that we are united and that we young people are unstoppable. Greta Thunberg. If you don't act, we will. Elizabeth Wanjiru-Watihi. No child should grow up not knowing what clean water is or never know what running water is. Autumn Peltier. So, if anyone ever tells you that women can't be scientists, if anyone ever tells you women's ideas aren't good enough or smart enough, don't listen to them. Women can be anything they want to be and make the impossible possible, just like these scientists did. They persisted, and so should you.